We have Dr. Paul, right, who's a very strong advocate, right, of labor rights. And he also financed for this event, right, for this hall. So give him a hand, right? He paid for this hall. And he will speak now. You open the event.
Yeah, hey, thanks very much, Gilbert. I'd like to thank Gilbert for letting me say a few words at the beginning of this event. And I also apologize that I've also got a function to attend, so I have to leave early. At the start, I'd like to clarify that these remarks are all made in my personal capacity and they do not represent any institution with anybody's name on it, just in case somebody gets offended. So please take it out on me, don't take it out on any institution. First of all, I'd like to remind everyone about the origins of May Day. And you know, as I was preparing for this talk, I went to look it up. And it turns out May 1st actually was May 1st, 1886. And it didn't start in Russia, or it didn't start in China, or it didn't start in Cuba, but it actually started in Chicago, in the United States, when workers were campaigning for the right to an 8-hour work day. It's something that we take for granted, you know, working 9 to 5. But in those days, it was considered something very revolutionary and something terrible. And so these guys got into serious trouble, and they had the famous Haymarket trials. But the Haymarket trials were not just bad because they put down the workers. They were also very bad because they raised questions about police procedures. And I think it's very sad that 140 years later in Singapore, we are still concerned about police procedures. You know, you all know the story about how the poor elderly man who's about to lose his livelihood apparently gets police knocking on the door of his home at 12 midnight, asking him about a letter written in a language he doesn't even know how to write. I mean, that's really, really sad. And his mobile phone is seized. Hopefully, the authorities will find the real person who is responsible for those threatening letters so that the person will be punished and this poor old man will be left on his own. In this case, I think it's a good reminder that we need to hold the authorities accountable and transparent for what they're doing to ensure that the real perpetrators are brought to justice without harming ordinary people who are trying to seek an honest living. You know, since time immemorial, people in power have always tried to divide and rule. That was what the British did. That's what every empire has done. The Roman Empire, all these other empires have done. You know, they divide men from women, old from young, foreigners from local, blue collar from white collar, daily rated from monthly rated, and now those with fixed income versus the so-called gig economy. So we must resist such efforts to divide ourselves. And I think that blaming people from overseas for bad decisions and bad policies which are made on the top is really a bad idea. Because these people come to Singapore looking for a better life for their families. Singapore is actually the only developed country without a minimum wage. And you know, when you think about it, a minimum wage is something which will help Singaporeans far more than it's going to help people coming from overseas. Because I can tell you this, even in my own field, the junior doctors tell me this, and I don't know how true it is. They say that every time they complain about conditions in a public hospital, they are told, oh, you know, complain lah. You know, we can hire somebody from South or Southeast Asia who's willing to work for $3,000 a month. And you know, if even doctors are feeling this kind of thing, you can imagine what other professions are facing. But to me, this is unfair, not only to them, but it's also unfair to the people who are coming in. Because these people come in, they start work at $3,000 a month, they're used to living the life of a doctor in some other country, and then they try and live the same kind of life and they find that Singapore is way too expensive for them. So if we had a minimum wage that applied to both Singaporeans and foreigners, the playing field would be level. See, companies would not go and look for somebody just because he's cheaper. There would be a level playing field, and if we had some way of taking into account 2 weeks of reservists every year, you know, I suggested to a court that when we do a performance appraisal, every Singaporean male should be judged on a 50-week year versus a non-Singaporean should be judged on 52 weeks. Because in reality, we only have 50 weeks, right? If it's 2 weeks of income, some years you get overseas, you get 6 weeks in Australia or something like that. But just to be fair, every Singaporean male with NS liability should be judged on a 50-week year. And I believe that we're not asking for handouts, we're not asking for affirmative action, we're not asking for Bumiputra treatment. You know, what we're asking for is a level playing field. And when there's a level playing field, the highly qualified foreigners who can contribute to Singapore will come. And the Singaporeans will be judged on a level playing field, and I think we'll do fine. Singaporeans are hard workers, we are well educated, we have got a good background and community. So I think what we need is not handouts, and what we're asking for is not handouts, but what we're asking for is a level playing field. Next point is that, we live in a very unique country. You all heard the story about how the junior colleges are being merged because, and schools are being merged because apparently there's not enough young people around. But Singapore's population has increased from 3 million to 4.5 million to 5.5 million, and in a few years' time it's going to be 6.9 million. It's the only country in the world where the population increases, but there's not enough children to fill the schools and the junior colleges. What is happening? I mean, it doesn't make sense that the population is increasing by increasing numbers of people who are too old to have children. What does that mean? Why is the government bringing in people who are too old to have children? And what these people are going to do, and I can tell you from somebody who is working in a sector which has to deal with elderly people and a lot of the needs of elderly people, what they're doing is aggravating the issue. And they're putting these poor Singaporean children who are struggling to find a place, instead of looking after 1 or 2 people in the future, they're going to have to look after a lot more people who are being brought in at an older age group. Again, this is very, very unusual, and it's something I think that needs to be questioned, because the purpose of immigration is to try and improve, to fill in gaps, to allow people opportunities, people who have talent, people who can make a contribution to society to come in. See, you just don't want to bring in people who are going to lower the wages for people around you. This race to the bottom is really not going to help anybody. So finally, I'd appeal to all of you, those who are speaking and those of you who took the time to come here, to take some time to reflect on the sacrifices of those who stood up for our rights more than 50 years ago. The pioneer unionists, the leaders of the Hockley bus strike, and others who helped win independence for Singapore, and some of the basic rights that we take for granted. That time, the authorities tried to divide the people into English educated, Chinese educated, Malay, Chinese, that kind of thing. Okay, but the pioneer generation refused to fall into that trap. We don't want to fall into a similar trap. Okay? All workers matter, whether they're local or people who come from overseas. But don't listen to people who ask us to steal other people's lunch. You see, we're not in the business of stealing people's lunch, when they themselves are paid millions. Because when the playing field is level, Singaporeans and high-quality foreigners can come together to make a better place for all of us. So I'd like to wish you all a very good afternoon, and hopefully it'll be a very meaningful seminar. Happy May Day, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah, Paul, thanks.